Hello, and welcome to the second online lecture for desktop publishing. And today we are going to do some simple reviews of PowerPoint because, as you know, that's the critical assignment at the moment. And I'm hoping that all of you are still working on PowerPoint. Now, this was included in the message that I sent earlier, but if you don't actually have PowerPoint, you can download it for free. Just Google Office 360 and use your student email address, and you can get a free license for all of the Microsoft Office products, and so PowerPoint being one of them. Okay, so today we've already covered a lot of this stuff before, but I wanted to make sure that you had it fresh in your mind. So we're just going to review some of the basics of how to use PowerPoint and how to customize your work so that it doesn't look like every other PowerPoint in the world. And so let's start with what we're going to be covering today. Let me just tap this here. PowerPoint basics. Now, I'm making a custom background. Now, as you remember, we make a custom background. We don't actually do that in PowerPoint. We do that in Photoshop. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do is leave PowerPoint temporarily. And so I'm going to get my notes there. So if you go to your basic screen, whatever the screen is, and so if you were to go to display settings, you should be able to find out what your resolution is. And let's see if I can locate that to put on my glasses here. And the resolution is listed here as 1920 by 1080, which I believe is correct. So we're going to go with that. So then, if we go to Photoshop, which some of you should be familiar with, and once again, you need to make sure you have these Adobe products and they're available to you for free. So here we're just going to create a new document. And if I go to image size, as you can see over here, I can see that that is 1920 by 1080. So in this case, now remember, this is kind of important. When we were talking about PowerPoint before, we were talking about in the context of the actual classroom where the projector had, probably a substandard screen resolution. Don't worry about that anymore. Just use whatever resolution your system has, and we'll stick with that because it's just going to make more sense for what we're doing. Okay, so the method that we started with was, first of all, you got a blank slide here. And let's say that you wanted to do a gradient background. Let's start with that because that's what we talked about before. If you look down here, you'll see we have these two color patches. So the first one, if I double click on that, that for some reason turns out to be like a yellow. So we can pick a color. Let's say that I want to pick kind of a light blue like that. So notice the top patch is now light blue. The bottom patch is now black. Let's say I prefer a lighter color. Let's say I go to a light blue like that. So we go from dark blue to light blue. Then this is, I believe, that's it. Your gradient tool is attached to your paint bucket. And so I'm just going to leave it on gradient. Then if I draw a line from top to bottom like this, you'll see it creates a gradient. I can also do the same thing going from bottom to top. Creates a gradient that way, or I can go left to right, and you get the idea. I can even do it diagonally if I want to. And so I don't want you to feel that this is the only way you can do it, but it is one way you can do it. So let's say that that's kind of what you're interested in, or let's do it this way. Let's go from bottom to top, like that. So let's say we're going to have a light top of your background and kind of filtering down towards the bottom there. And let's say we want some kind of identifying mark. Now let's say that you're representing a company. And we can do this a couple of different ways. let's say we'll just go ahead and create something here. If we go to our text tool in Photoshop and you were to create some text there, and let's say that your company is one of those companies with acronyms. Let's say it's ECRM, whatever that means. Now right now it's coming out yellow. So let's say we want to adjust this. Let's say the company colors happen to be blue. That doesn't work too badly. And so we say OK. But we can also go a little bit further. Now this, we don't necessarily always want to use filters and such, or templates, but there is a place for them. So if we go to under Window, we go to Styles. Now you see Styles will appear here. And we can see if we can get something out of these that might be useful. Now I'm not saying to rely on these because they're really just somebody else's artwork, but every once in a while in a pinch they actually can save you some time. So if you're making up a company, this might not be a bad way to go, but just find one that actually looks reasonable. And let's say, don't really like that one. Don't really like that one. And let's say I like something like that. That's kind of subtle. That's got kind of a drop shadow there, and it's not all that different from what we created. And if I move that up there, that could be your heading for the slide, and that will appear in each one of your slides. And obviously, this is your presentation. You can design it any way you want it to be, but that could be an example of a way to personalize it. Or you could use an image or something like that, a background image. Now, what I recommend that you not do is don't crowd the slide. If we go back to the presentation for a moment. So what to consider in your presentation is you don't want to crowd the slide. You don't want to distract from the information. And so therefore your slide background should be as gentle as possible. It should be as nondescript as possible while still having the identity of whatever company you're trying to represent or whatever is appropriate. You don't want to make it something that's going to detract from what you're doing. So if we're back here then, let's go ahead and save this because we got it the right size. And again, you can customize this further. You can do all kinds of other things to the slide, whatever it is that you need to do. But we're going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to create a folder for this. I'm just going to call it PowerPoint. And in there, I'm going to save this as we'll save it as a BMP. BMP is always a universal file. And I'm just going to call this slide_background. And if I hit save, and I'm just going to hit OK there for that dialog box. And this dialog box is just standard for BMPs. And most of this information, I just leave it alone. Just leave it under Windows, and 24-bit is fine. And there it is. Okay, so now that we've done that, if we want to create a PowerPoint background, what we want to do is we want to create what's called a slide master. Now, this is something we didn't really cover before. We kind of did it in pieces, but what I want to do now is show you how to save yourself some time. Because you're going to do the same presentation, you want the same basics for the presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build a presentation from scratch. So therefore, this is the PowerPoint notes that I'm using for this video. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new presentation right here, a new blank presentation. And so there we go. We got a nice blank presentation. So our first slide is completely white, as you can see, and this is completely white. So what we want to do is we want to apply that to the whole presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and save the presentation. And PowerPoint, we'll just put that right there, and we're going to call this slide underscore master demo. So if I do that, I hit save, and there we are. And the reason I'm doing that is I just want to make sure that I've established early on where it is so that I don't lose it. Now, the next part here is under the View tab. And this is something you don't usually go here a lot. And under the View tab, you'll see this little thing here called Slide Master. So if I hit Slide Master, this will give me a whole bunch of options. Now, this is kind of important. When we talk about master, you see how this slide is bigger than all these other ones? These little slides here represent all the types of slides that you can have. So let's say that you want all of your slides that look like this to be formatted the same way. So slides with two dialog boxes, or two bullet lists rather, you can have them all appear in a different color than slides with actually a completely different color with slides with this style, or this one, for example. But what we're talking about here, since we don't actually know which slides we're going to be using at this point, and this will filter down to all of them. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's say that in the slide, the big slide, the master slide that governs all these others, I go over to background styles, and I go to format background. Now I see this is, you can see you have all these options they give you. But I can hit format background, and so then we're over here. You say over here, and we're going to go to picture or texture fill, and we're going to go to insert, and we see we have our background there. And if I hit insert, suddenly you'll notice all of the possible slides have that information. Now, another good rule that you can go with, notice how our logo up here is not interfering with any of this stuff, because this information here is given to you to show you where it will show up on the slides. And so the last thing you want to do is have to move your stuff to accommodate a slide background that you know is going to be there in the first place. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave all this alone, and make sure that now that we know that this fits, if you had a picture here, for example, and you knew that your headline was going to cover that and be distracting, then you'd want to go back and readjust your background. So this way you only have to do it once. Okay, now the next thing that we want to do is we want to look at our text. So it says click to edit master text style, and I go up to fonts. And let's say I want to say, so I highlight the text, and I go up to fonts, and I choose, let's say I choose Garamond. Now notice Garamond now affected all of the text. So now all of these levels of information are coming out in Garamond, which is a Roman font, which you can tell because it has serifs. And so let's say we also want to go further. So you highlight the text, and let's say we just go right to color here, and we choose a dark blue. And in this particular case, it didn't accept the other ones, so I go back to color here, and I choose the same dark blue for that. Now notice there, this is kind of a good example. Notice how the colors here become less effective as they get further down, because that particular part of the background is now burying it. So you could change the background, or you have a little bit of latitude here. What if we were to make this part of the color, let's say, lighter on the scale? That probably didn't do any good. No, that made it worse. So perhaps instead of that, let's say we choose a darker color, and that actually did help. So that makes it stand out more. And of course, you could even go further than that. But let's say that this is acceptable at the moment. So we just go ahead and close this out. And now we're back at the beginning again. So if I were to go click on this and type in, let's say we want to say this is a general board meeting. And that could be the outline of what we're saying. And then we make a new slide. Automatically it's coming up with what we're going to talk about. So I could say company goals, and then I got my first goal, and let's say increase productivity. And next goal might be decrease costs, and so on. And so there, now we'll do one more. Hire more people and produce a better product. Makes us consistent. Okay, so let's say that those are the goals. Now this is a standard bullet list. Now when you're on the bullet list, it's easy to go immediately up here to animations, because that's where your if you want your bullets to come in, you want to do one of these. You could do fly in, which would just have them fly up like that. You can do appear, where they just appear. You can do fade in like that. Or I've been using float in lately because that's kind of cute. It's not too distracting. It doesn't take away from what you're doing. So let's say you're going there. Also, we want the slides under transitions. We want the slides, let's say, to fade from one slide to the next. So if you're looking at the first slide and you hit your display button and then you advance the slides by hitting the space bar, you get this, and then every time you hit the space bar, you see I'm not hitting the space bar now I am, and there we go. And then of course that's the end of the show. Okay, so that's the basics. Now let's say you want to add another slide. So we go back to home and then hit your new slide button. There's your next slide. And let's say we put in picture, let's say our new facility. And let's say we want a picture of the facility, and let's make it up as we go along. Let's say we're building in Rochester, and let's say 40 acres. And we'll say opening this November. Oh. And let's say that's enough text. Now I want to put a picture of the facility here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the end of this, and I'm just going to scoot that in a little bit. So you can customize the slide as you go around. Now let's say we want a picture of a building. So that's easy enough to do. So let's say I open up a tab here and I go to Google, and let's say I type in big building, and then I go to images, and this is just for fun here. So let's see if we can find a picture that would match that. And these buildings do not look like what I'm describing here at all, but that's okay. So maybe instead of building, let's say I'm thinking of a factory. So let's say I say factory. And so actually a lot of those would work. That one's kind of ugly. Why would you name a factory factory? That's pretty cute. Okay, let's say this one looks generic enough. I don't even know what it is. All right, so let's say I save that image and PowerPoint. I'm just going to call this factory, and we're done with that. So let's say we're back in our presentation, and I go to insert picture, and there's my factory picture, which is huge. So all I got to do is bring it down, let's say like that. So let's say I wanted that to appear in the build order. Let's say I go to animation, I choose float in. Now, in this particular case, you see the image comes in last. So what if I would prefer that it come in first? If I say move earlier, now it's 3, now it's 2, now it's 1. So it shows up as the first picture, then we go to these other ones. And so if we go back to our presentation and we go like that, and then we go from one to the other, company goals, etc. And our new facility, there we go, there we go, there we go. So you get the general idea. So you see, you can have them in different orders. So if you click on any of these things, you can move them later or earlier. And basically, that's pretty much all you need to know about that. Now, one other thing. Let's say we wanted to insert a video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new slide. So if I go home here and I go into another slide here, and this one I'm going to say, here is a random video. And so, okay, so if I go to my cornucopia here, let's say I just grab this insert video here. And I'm just going to go to, I'm just going to put the Methodist Communication Department logo there, which only runs for a few seconds. And if I insert that, there it is. Now, of course, I can make it bigger or smaller just by manipulating these. And if you hold down the Shift key, you can be sure that the proportions will be the same. And so if we play this, you can see what it does its thing there. And so here, you get a few options here. You can format the video, and it will have different options for outlines and such. And so you can also choose to slide a position there or move it yourself. And finally, you can even adjust the brightness and things like that if that's necessary, or crop it. So those are all things that you can experiment with if you need to. If you go up here to animations and you select the video, start on click, or you can also do start either with previous or after previous, and if it's the first thing, you can just choose either one. And so it'll start automatically. So let's say we go to this slide and we bring in these. You see it'll start automatically as soon as you enter the page. And maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe it's not. But there you go. And so, let's get out of there. So that'll give you the basics of what you can do with PowerPoint. And so you don't have to include all of these in your presentation. Oh, and while we're here, I wanted to go over one thing. We made a little bitty tiny mistake here. If you notice, there's a blue border around the major headlines there. And that was done in the slide master. So I'm going to go back to slide master and fix that real quick because I think I know where it is. So if I go back to view and I go to slide master, so now I've reopened this, and let's say I click on here and I go to shape options. Let's say I go here and I go to line. So you see, just so you can understand, if I hit solid fill, I can make that headline have its own little background area if I want to. Not necessarily the wrong thing to do, but I don't choose to do that. I can also choose different line options. For example, I could make that a bright red line, and I could make that nice and thick. Or I could just choose no line at all, which is what I want to do. And once I've done that, if I close off the view, you'll see that that's all gone now. And so that's really up to you, how you want to format your program. And of course, if I want to reorder these slides, I can just move them up and down in order and mix and match any way I want. Or I could even go down here to sorter view, and I can sort or move them around any way I want. You've seen that before. And so that's basically where we are with the class. And I've tried to cover the basics of PowerPoint. So that's basically where we are at this point. And so this is how to use PowerPoint. And what I want you to do is to work on your presentations and try to make them personalized and effective for what your topic is. And you should be able to use the same topics that you already have. And of course, if you want to add custom videos, you can, or anything else. If you need resources, we'll do the best we can. But most of the stuff you should be able to do on your own with whatever you have around you. So let me know how this is going, and there will be future assignments that require you to send me updates about where you are right now. But in the meantime, have a good day.